Welcome back to the Rules Plus podcast. In last week's opening episode for the 2024 football season, I launched our preseason preparation by announcing that I'll be covering one of the 12 chapters of the Reading Study Guide to NCAA Football Rules in each of the 12 episodes until August. I started last week with Chapter 1, an introduction to the purpose and organization of the study guide, whose approach is not based on simply plodding mindlessly in sequence through rules 1 to 12, but rather on studying phases of the game, as the guide puts it, rather than on one rule at a time in isolation. Fittingly, Chapter 2 of the study guide is about recent rules changes, so the topic for today is the set of changes for 2024. But what I cover here will hardly be the last word about new rules for three reasons. First, for now, I'm using the 2023 edition of the study guide until I secure my copy of the 2024 edition. Second, here in mid-May, we do not yet have access to follow-up bulletins, memos, and videos from Rules Editor Steve Shaw, with explanations, clarifications, and perhaps addendums or modifications concerning the new rules. Third, we who work Texas high school football do not yet have complete information from the University Interscholastic League about its annual list of exceptions to NCAA rules for Texas high schools. However, it's not too soon to start preparing. For college officials, preseason resources are now available through their CFO membership, and for Texas high school officials, similar resources are also starting to appear through our membership in the Texas Association of Sports Officials. The TASO Virtual Training Series video number 5, for example, concerning rules changes, was just released the day before yesterday when this is being recorded, that is May 22nd. TASO regional rules clinics begin in less than a month, including our Austin Rules Clinic on June 22nd. The TASO annual meeting will be in Abilene from August 2nd to 3rd, with keynote speaker NCAA Secretary Rules Editor Steve Shaw. The annual meeting will include the latest information about 2024 NCAA football rule changes and points of emphasis, as well as about 2024 UIL exceptions. So here are the 6 NCAA rules changes for 2024. At the end of last week's episode, I offered this list of changes that are publicized currently in media reports. Most of these changes are relevant to colleges more than to high schools, in my view. Rule 1-4-11-B, Exception, Coach-to-Player Communications. For FBS institutions only, the rule is, in the words of the Rules Committee, permissive for the use of a communication device with one designated player on offense and one on defense. The choice of the term permissive emphasizes that using such a device is hardly mandatory, but it's hard to imagine any FBS programs would decline to keep up with the Joneses by choosing not to use such devices. If you're a high school baseball umpire, I think you'll see that this rule change is akin to the change this year to allow the PitchCom technology between the coach and the catcher. A second change, Rule 1-4-11-A, Exception 3, Tablets for in-game video. This additional technology is also now permissive for all NCAA football divisions, not just for the big dogs. Rule 3-3-5, 2-minute timeout. Mimicking the long-time practice of the NFL, college games will now have a clock stoppage at the 2-minute point of the second and fourth periods. I'm guessing officials will be sternly directed to not refer to this stoppage as a 2-minute warning, which is a term long associated with the NFL dating back decades to the days when the scoreboard clock was not official. So the stoppage was originally addressed to an actual need to warn teams that play was about to end in each of those two quarters. For the colleges, the timeout is simply a stoppage, a gratuitous nod to add drama to the end of each half, as well as to provide a more trifling benefit of a clearly conspicuous inflection point for converting to last 2-minute timing rules, such as for first downs, fouls by teams ahead in the score or behind in the score, and 10-second runoffs. Rule 12-4-3, Collaborative Instant Replay. Anything in Rule 12 clearly applies only to college games because Texas high schools have no instant replay except for during state championship games. Rule 9-1-15, Horse collar tackle. Protection has been expanded to include a ball carrier or potential passer inside the tackle box. And finally, Rule 3-2-1-B, use of instant replay after halftime intermission. This change, of course, also only applies to college games. It seems that it used to be possible to return from the halftime break and still correct a first-half situation. Now, instant replay must complete all aspects of its review before halftime can begin. So, what are the implications of these changes for our high school games this fall? There are reports that the UIL intends to allow the use of tablets and associated equipment at halftime and in the press box coaching areas, but not on the sidelines. More clarity on that is no doubt coming. The other best candidates for UIL approval seem obvious: the 2-minute timeout and the horse collar extended protection. We shall see. Well, let's look now at 4 prior years of rules changes. Chapter 2 of the 2023 Reading Study Guide includes a bonus besides simply a list of changes for the then upcoming season. In its words, the chapter revisits changes from the previous 2 years, as well as talking about the current year's changes. Therein lies one advantage of using the 2023 edition at the moment. We can remind ourselves of changes from 3 years prior to 2024, namely changes from 2023, 2022, and 2021. Not only does revisiting changes refresh our memory of the substance and intent of recent changes, revisiting allows us to search for patterns and trends that may be very enlightening for considering intent and philosophy when we make rulings on the field. It's not simply speculative to suggest there are patterns and connections to and among rules changes from one year to another. As I explained in the inaugural Rules Plus episode from June 20th, 2023, the NCAA Football Rules Committee has adopted a protocol to follow using a 2-year cycle of alternating on years and off years for introducing rules changes. The intent is that so-called major changes are allowed in even-numbered years, though the Rules Committee may make changes in odd-numbered years for 3 reasons: to address player safety, to adjust rules from the previous season that have not achieved their purpose, or to adopt measures that would help improve the image of the game. You can judge for yourself, after I now list the changes for 2020 through 2024, whether the committee has been faithful to that protocol. I include 2020 changes because I have notes about them, and including those changes gives us 2 full even year followed by odd year cycles to consider as we begin a 3rd such cycle with the 2024 changes. I remind you, the protocol used by the Rules Committee calls for any major changes to be introduced in 2020, 2022, and 2024, with restraint in making subsequent changes in 2021 and 2023, changes that should be limited to addressing only safety adjustments, or image. But before I list the 5 sets of rules changes, I challenge you to take a tiny pop quiz on the 2 or 3 most important changes from each of the years 2020 through 2023. Let's see how much revisiting of prior rules changes you should consider doing in order to feel confident you're sufficiently refreshed on those prior changes. Answer each item to follow with simply true or false, and I'll breeze through them quickly to encourage you to make a quick decision akin to the limited time we have during a down to decide whether and how a rule applies. So here we go. 3 items for the quiz for 2020 rules changes. Again, true or false. Substitution infractions by Team B are dead ball fouls. 2. With Team A in a scrimmage kick formation, no Team B player within 1 yard of the line of scrimmage may line up within the frame of the snapper's body. And 3. Penalty enforcements may carry over to the succeeding spot in extra periods. You want to take a moment here? Okay. For the substitution infractions being dead ball fouls, that is now false and has been, of course, since 2020. The rule reference is 3-5-3. That's actually a rather significant change, and it took some getting used to because many of the offensive or Team A fouls in such situations are indeed called as dead ball fouls. 2, with Team A in the scrimmage kick formation and talking about lining up within the frame of the snapper's body, that is true. The reference is 6-3-14. And penalty enforcements carrying over to extra periods, that also is true. Okay, the quiz for 2021 rules changes. Beginning with the second overtime period, teams try only a 1-point conversion from the 3-yard line. And 2, beginning with the third overtime period, teams run only a 2-point conversion from the 3-yard line. Okay, as far as the second overtime period, of course, teams now try the 2-point conversion. This is false. The reference is 3-1-3-E. And concerning the third overtime period, that is true. The reference is 3-1-3-F. Moving on to the 2022 rules changes. 3 questions here. 1. The penalty is 10 yards for a Team B player who blocks or fouls an opponent after making a valid or invalid fair catch signal and who doesn't touch the ball. 2. The penalty is 5 yards and a loss of down for a Team A player who intentionally touches a legal forward pass before it has touched an opponent or an official. And 3. Prior to a change of team possession, Team A players may block below the waist if the block is 1. Within 5 yards beyond the neutral zone, 2. From the front, and 3. Neither directed back to the original position of the ball at the snap, nor toward his own end line. Okay, the answers. The penalty indeed is 10 yards. That's true. The reference is 6-5-4. And the penalty is 5 yards and now a loss of down for illegally touching. That is reference 7-3-11. And the third item, however, of course, is clearly false. The provisions for blocking below the waist have been restricted even further, of course, since 2022. The reference is 9-1-6. And finally, 2023 rules changes. Here are 2 quiz questions. 1. A period shall be extended for an untimed down if a penalty is accepted for a live ball foul, offsetting fouls, or an inadvertent whistle during a down in which time expires in the second or fourth quarter. And 2. Consecutive team timeouts are not allowed during the same dead ball interval during the second or fourth quarter. Well, of course, the answer for 1 is true. The reference is 3-2-3-A. And the answer for 2 is false. This applies about consecutive team timeouts to all of the periods in a game, not just the second or fourth. So how'd you do? I'll confess that for an old-timer like me, recent rules changes can tempt me to overthink a situation because I'm used to years of handling a situation a different way. The best example for me recently is the return to a loss of down for illegally touching a forward pass. The loss of down existed for many years, but then it went away. I worked so hard to remember that first change that now I have to remind myself that a subsequent change has brought the loss of down back. It's not only hard to teach an old dog new tricks, it's really hard to teach an old dog that's learned new tricks to relearn his old tricks. Another change I have to discipline myself to remember is to now award an automatic first down for any defensive holding foul, a change from 2022 that eliminated a section at that time 9-3-5 and a section 10-2-2-E-2 that specifically addressed a special case of illegal use of hands or arms by the defense during passing downs. It's still a challenge for me to unlearn the former rule that the first down only applied to forward passes that crossed the neutral zone. Well, here is then a collection of lists of rules changes for the 5-year period 2020 to 2024, courtesy of my notes for 2020 and Chapter 2 of the 2023 Reading Study Guide for 2021 to 2023. Here are the lists that I promised of the last 5 seasons of NCAA rules changes. Okay, the major rules changes for 2020, and there were 11. I'll try to go through these somewhat quickly. The references and then essentially what the rule change was about. 142 refer to players' numbering. 145, items A through C, were about concurrently worn jerseys being allowed and a jersey penalty redefined. 227.12, concerning disqualified versus ejected players. That was redefined. 311, pregame warm-up procedures were specified. 353, Team B substitution was altered to a live ball foul. 6-3-14, protection of the snapper on scrimmage kicks was enhanced. 9-2-2, no more than 2 players were allowed to be assigned the same number. 10-2-5, penalty enforcement carryover to succeeding spot in extra periods. 11-1, officials' jurisdiction adjusted to start 90 minutes before kickoff. 12-3-6, instant replay, clock adjustments at the end of the half. And 12-6-2, expectations to not exceed 2 minutes to complete a review. The rules changes for 2021, 4 of them. 124A, concerning the team area and coaching box extended to the 20-yard lines. 313E, extra periods, beginning with the third extra period. A possession series is a 2-point try. 313F, in extra periods, beginning with the second period, the try for point must be for 2. And 335B, a review of the process established for questionable tactics, including feigning injury. Major changes for 2022, 8 in total. 335B, findings concerning feigning injury sent to conference office for further action. 413R, ball declared dead when ball carrier simulates feet first slide. 654, penalty reduced to 10 yards for illegal contact after a fair catch signal. 7311, penalty adds loss of down for illegal touching. 913 and 914. An appeal option was added for confirmed second half targeting fouls. 916. Blocking below the waist is further restricted to inside the tackle box. 921-A-1. Enhanced penalty options for Team B unsportsmanlike conduct fouls during pass plays. And 934 items C through E, defensive holding penalties now include an automatic first down in all cases. Major changes for 2023, 7 of them. 1411D, codified restrictions concerning drones within the playing enclosure. 321C, added halftime intermission warm-up guidelines. 323A, extension of periods applicable only in the second and fourth quarters. 332E1, no clock stoppage for first downs except in the last 2 minutes of each half. 334A, no consecutive team timeouts during the same dead ball period. 1113, halftime intermission field policy added. 1221C, added the optional use of replay without a booth replay official. And finally, it looks like the major rules changes for 2024 will be 6, 1411B, exception, permissive to use a device for coach-player communication for teams A and B. 1411A, exception 3, permissive to use tablets in all NCAA divisions. 321B, instant replay review must be completed before halftime begins. 335, 2-minute timeout added for second and fourth quarters. 9115, protection from horse collar tackle extended to players inside the tackle box. And 1243, collaborative instant replay. So, the question now becomes, do you see any patterns or trends emerging? I have a few thoughts. For the 2020 to 2021 cycle, an active period. The obvious metrics for crafting a narrative of a half-decade of rules evolution are 1, the number, and 2, the nature of changes from year to year. Look first at the 2-year cycle for, again, 2020 to 2021. Regarding the number of changes, the nearly dozen changes in 2020 certainly stand out, a very large number indeed. However, as an even-numbered year, by the Rules Committee protocol, 2020 was a so-called on year for major changes. And then, in 2021, a so-called off year for the cycle, there were indeed only 4 changes. But regarding the nature of those changes, were the 2021 changes limited, as called for by the protocol, to enhancing safety, to clarifying 2020 changes, or to promoting the brand of NCAA football? Well, none of the 2021 changes offered clarifications of 2020 changes, but I can make a case that the changes do check the boxes for addressing safety and for promoting the NCAA brand. Regarding safety, it doesn't require much argument, I think, to see that the 2 provisions in 313 to modify the overtime rules were inspired by just a few cases in which high-profile games featured multiple extra periods, requiring players to endure dozens of additional plays, clearly compounding the risks of injuries to exhausted players. Indeed, one strong rationale for not following the NFL's lead in simply playing additional football for the NCAA tiebreaker protocol is the desire for a relatively speedy process to determine a winner. Regarding image, if you try to read the minds of the Football Rules Committee, you could infer that the provision in 335B for feigning injury review process promotes the NCAA brand by focusing on coaching ethics. After all, Prior to 2021, 335B contained only a brief 22-word statement regarding feigning injuries. It said, quote, that attention is directed to the strongly worded statement in the football code, end quote, regarding coaching ethics. In short, the Rules Committee at that time settled for trusting coaches to adhere to an honor system. The change to 335B in 2021 was an additional 81-word preamble that minced no words. It includes the explicit view, quote, feigning an injury is unethical, end quote. If that wasn't direct enough, the provision continues, quote, feigning an injury is dishonest, unsportsmanlike, and contrary to the spirit of the rules, end quote. The provision then specifies a review process that institutions may access that includes the involvement of the, quote, National Coordinator of Football Officials, end quote. The Rules Committee left no room to doubt its commitment to protecting the image of the game. The one provision that doesn't seem related to protecting, clarifying, or image building is the provision in 124A to permanently expand the team area. The gesture strikes me as simply a bone thrown to coaches who were reluctant to give back team area real estate once the genie was let out of the bottle when a distancing measure in response to the COVID pandemic was temporarily authorized. Now, the 2022 to 2023 cycle, a calmer period? After the very active cycle introduced by the nearly dozen rules changes in 2020, the cycle introduced in 2022 is demonstratively calmer by virtue of both the metrics of number and of nature of the changes. Regarding the number of changes, the 8 changes in the on year, that is, of course, 2022, were nearly matched by the 7 changes in the off year of 2023. So the one metric of interest for this cycle is whether the nature of the off-year changes reflect the safety clarification image goals for an off-year change. Regarding the nature of the 2022 rules changes, I judge 2 of them to be related to safety: shutting down a play when a ball carrier simulates a slide, 413R, and further limiting blocking below the waist to the area only in the tackle box. I judge the 3 changes in penalty provisions to be related to competitive balance: reducing to 10 yards illegal contact by a player who signals a fair catch, 654, adding a loss of down to illegally touching a forward pass, 7311, and expanding an automatic first down to all defensive holding fouls. I judge the enhanced penalty options for Team B unsportsmanlike conduct fouls to be related to enhancing the image of the game. I judge the appeal option for second-half targeting fouls, 913 and 4, to be related to supporting players' rights to due process. So what about the nature of the 2023 changes? Were they limited to enhancing safety, to clarifying 2022 changes, or to promoting the brand of NCAA football? 4 of the provisions address the use of drones and administrative procedures for halftime and replay protocol relevant to college games. For the off year, such tidying up seems appropriate. The question is, do the timing provisions address appropriate off-year areas for change? I judge that provisions concerning extension of periods, clock stoppages for first downs, and consecutive timeouts address an imaging purpose, namely to shorten the games to be closer to the 3-hour window of NFL games. You could also argue that shortening games and eliminating a few plays improves player safety. On the surface, these changes indeed seem to be relatively minor. But be careful not to dismiss serious study of seemingly minor changes, because sometimes such changes can turn out to be pretty important. Let me illustrate. How, at your own risk, do you regard a change as minor, using this extension of periods change as a cautionary tale? Here's a plausible play scenario. Working against a howling wind, suppose Team A's quarterback is beyond the neutral zone when he throws and completes a fourth down pass in Team B's end zone as time expires in the first quarter. Because the penalty for the illegal forward pass includes a loss of down, Team B will have the ball. But prior to 2021, the period would not be extended, so Team B would lose its wind advantage for its ensuing first down play. The reason is that prior to 2021, Rule 323A1 contained a blanket provision that the period was not extended if a live ball foul was by the team in possession and the penalty included a loss of down. An editorial change in 2021 added to the provision the phrase, quote, at the option of the offended team. In this case, it seems likely that Team B would choose for the period to be extended, an option granted by the seemingly innocuous editorial change. And that's what makes this play interesting and instructive. The lesson here is that we should not ignore editorial changes in our preseason study of rules changes. The 2021 editorial change is as much an important rules change as is the explicit 2023 change that now provides for extending a period only in the case of the second and fourth periods. I could, and in fact did, say a great deal more about these seemingly minor 2023 changes. In last year's first episode of this Rules Plus podcast, posted on June 20th, 2023, I discussed at length why the 2023 changes are far more impactful than meets the eye. The discussion is quite lengthy, too long to include here, but I recommend that episode to you if you would like to hear extensive discussion of those 2023 changes. And here's an additional note about the number of changes year to year. I've referred to the number of changes year to year as a useful metric. I'll repeat those numbers for you. 11 changes in 2020, 4 in 21, 8 in 22, 7 in 23, and 6 changes in 2024. If you disregard changes unrelated to high school games, however, including those referenced in Rules 11 and 12, those numbers change rather markedly. 6 changes in 2020 instead of 11, 3 in 21 instead of 4, 6 changes in 22 instead of 8, 3 changes in 23 instead of 7, and 3 changes in 2024 instead of 6. And let me remind you of a unicorn rules provision we saw in 2023. The UIL authored restriction during tries on upright defenders rushing immediately. I discussed that also in the June 20th, 2023 episode I've mentioned. As I suggested at the beginning of this episode, I'm sure we'll be returning to the subject of 2024 rules changes, as with the arrival of August, several important study resources will have become available, including the 2024 edition of the NCAA Rules Book and the Reading Study Guide, as well as videos, bulletins, clinics, and meetings available through College Football Officiating, the Texas Association of Sports Officials, and the Austin Football Officials Association. So, a closing word. I hope you'll make time to listen to next week's episode for discussion of Chapter 3 of the Reading Study Guide, all about the kicking game. The Reading Guide devotes 29 pages and more than 70 play scenarios to the topic, far more than one episode can cover. So listen in to see if I can extract the choicest nuggets and juiciest play scenarios to share with you. Remember, I'm a member of the Austin Football Officials Association, and we're open for new applicants right now. Our extensive training in the classroom, through Zoom, and with on-field experience begins in less than a month. If you'd like to learn more about us, contact us. You can email us at recruiting@afoa.ws, visit our website at www.austinfootballofficials.org, or call us at 512-298-2987. Until next time, have a great week.